the Author, a show about inspiring stories and conversations by creatives and all forms of art, music, movies, visual art, authors, creative writing, poetry, dance, culinary art, among others. Brought to you by the multi-award-winning author, life coach, and poet, Richard Mwebesa.
Yeah, so because what I heard you mention on the aspect of creativity, yes, I mean, your strategy may not necessarily work today. What you practiced when you're on the line and you're competing. I know there's a lot of mental fortitude because it is said medals or prizes are won even way before the sport starts. Yeah, it's the mental fortitude to carry on. Put in context, I just learned that the competition you do is you get to row 2 kilometers. That's 2,000 meters. So 2,000 meters is a long distance rowing because you're working your arms, you're working your legs, you're working the whole body. So is there a time that you reach and you're rowing and you feel like the muscles are aching, there's pain all over
absolutely.
your body and you feel like giving up?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I feel like half of being a good rower is just being able to tolerate a high level of pain and push through it and find a reason why it's worth it to you, because especially rowing a single when it's just you out there and there's no one else to kind of like draw energy from. I mean, it is a long race, so it's, you know, anywhere between like 8 and 9 minutes for you know, me, depending on the weather, and that is a long time to be racing full out. And you definitely get halfway and you start thinking like, you know, why do I do this? This is so hard. Like I could just slow down, you know, no one would even know. You have times where you're like, I don't think I can do it. Like, I don't think I can finish this race. I'm going to have to stop. And so there's this constant mental dialogue that's going on in your head. And it's this battle between your wills, the will to excel and to do the best you can, and the will to like get out of the pain cave, because you are deep in the pain cave and it sucks. Rowing is such a hard sport. Like people ask me like, oh, was it fun? I'm like, no, there's nothing fun about racing 2 kilometers in a rowing boat. Like it's not fun.
Wow.
It's just really hard.
It's hard.
And like, it's hard. It's so hard. And I remember someone saying like, you know, you have to be a bit of like a masochist to be a rower. You have to enjoy pain. You have to somehow believe that pain is good for you. Otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
Makes sense. Wow. Kathleen, that's interesting because I know you get to carry your own boat. How many kilograms is that boat?
Oh, it's light. It's like 14 kilos. 14
kilos. So what's the distance that you get to carry it? Do you carry it on your shoulders before?
You carry it on your shoulders. It just depends how far away it's stored, but there's nothing hard about carrying the boat.
So it's a
Racing
light boat.
is hard. Carrying the boat is easy.
It's the easy part. Wow. Interesting. So moving on, I know, I guess you've heard about the 5 S's of sport. The first is strength. The second is stamina. The third is skill. The fourth is spirit. Yeah, so I'll stick to those 4. I'll bring the 5th at the end. So of those 4, which do you think is ideal for rowing?
I mean, I think all of those are important. And I guess I have my own, I call it like my compass when I was visualizing training and thinking about my own personal philosophy around rowing. And so, I mean, I think it's very similar to those, right? For me, it was strong, skilled, fit, brave, right? And I think that kind of it'd be the same as what you said, but in different words. And so then as I was training and doing different training sessions, I would think about, okay, how does this contribute, you know, to these 4 things: to strength, to skill, to fitness, to bravery. And I think they are all, you can't do it without it's like a table with 4 legs, right? Like each of those things needs to be equally supported or you're going to get a wobbly table. And I think it can be very easy to focus so much on like the strength and fitness part of it. That's like very practical. That's your training. That's your long sessions on the water, just developing aerobic capacity, whatever. The skill one is much more nuanced. It takes a lot of focus in rowing to develop skill because it's so hard to get the perfect stroke. I mean, rowers will talk about this, like this elusive search for the perfect stroke. And sometimes, I would be out on training sessions for like 2 hours and people would be like, what do you think about for 2 hours? I'm like, literally, I'm thinking about every stroke. Like I'm focusing on the strokes and I'm trying to, every stroke you're thinking, okay, I was too early there. I was too late there. I was too high. I was too low. And so, that like finesse is less gratifying than just working out hard. I think working out hard, you release a lot of endorphins. You're like, yeah, I'm strong, I feel good. But to really get the most efficient speed is really in that skill aspect, and that takes a lot of focus. And then the courage one is so important, especially when it comes to racing. And it's probably the easiest one to neglect, and to integrate things into your training that force you to be brave, that force you to be courageous, that force you to be in that place of uncomfortable pain and racing and whatever. I think that's very important as well, because I think one of the most empowering things on race day is to be able to say to yourself, I've done this before, I've been here before, this is nothing new, this is just what I've done 100 times before. But it does take courage
validation,
to push yourself that
your
far.
inner self, that inner voice that tells you, I'll make it, I'll do it. Yes.
Yeah.
I like what you said earlier about practice. In the practice, that's where you get to see what you're doing right, what you're not doing okay, because I believe practice makes proficient. I mean, you're in the stroke, you want to give the best at it, because as said earlier, everyone else competing has their angle on how they're going to push their strokes, on how they're going to focus on each and every push and pull, and how they balance their body against the boards, and how they are playing out all the dynamics out there on the competitive arena. I should call it an arena, because it is an arena anyway, because you're fighting against the best of the best. Yes. So are there times that you compete and you feel like, I can't go on, I mean, I am all out, I mean, the batteries are down? Are there those moments in sports?
Yeah. 100% in rowing. I mean, and I think that I have been there, and I have been too far. Like there is such a thing as too far, and I've done that on multiple occasions, where I think one of the exciting things I found when I was first rowing was this sense of like pushing my barriers. And when I was training at Princeton that first year, especially during the winter, once a week we would have like a very hard workout, and I every week you would hit up against that barrier, which is the limit of what you are capable of, and you would push it a little further. And I think there was a glorification of like, how far can you push yourself? And like, the more you can push yourself, the better you are. But I think that what I discovered is actually there is such a thing as too far. And when I was rowing my first year, I would do those workouts and I would push myself as hard as I possibly could. And I would get sick. I would finish the workout, I would throw up, I would be lying on the floor for like 20 minutes, like in a daze, like barely aware of my surroundings.
Wow.
And I would tell myself like, that was so painful, I will never do that again. I will never do that again. And then I would come back the next week and I would do it again and I would do it again. And I think there can be maybe a desire for people to glorify that kind of behavior and be like, wow, you must be so good because you're like pushing yourself to sickness every week. But actually in the long term that wasn't good for me, and I ended up in the hospital, and it was dangerous, and I was in kidney they were worried I was going into kidney failure. And so I think one of the messages I also want to get out there is like, there is such a thing as too far. Wow. And I don't know if that is something that's peculiar to my biology. Maybe I've never met anyone who has the same problem that I have. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I had a whole bunch of tropical diseases as a child. I don't know. But I think that there has to be some kind of like balance that you have. And I think, something that I was very proud of was my ability to push myself so hard. The fact that I was able to get to a point of mental fortitude where I could just almost block out the pain and just push through.
Keep moving. Wow.
Right.
So, Kathleen, you mentioned something that is scary. Wow. So you say you reached a point of almost going into kidney failure because of the sport.
Yeah, so my last year at Princeton, I did one of these very competitive 2K indoor rowing races, and I became very sick. They took me to the University Health Center, and then they did some blood tests on me, and that was like Saturday that they did the blood tests. And then Monday, the doctor came in and she read the results, and she was like, you need to go to the ER. Like, your statistics look like you could be a kidney failure.
Wow.
So, that was quite frightening to realize,
because that's life-threatening.
Right. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, have I permanently damaged myself? Am I killing myself? What is this? Why is this? I'd always thought of myself as someone who was so strong and so healthy. And so to think that it was possible to push my body so far that it would react that way and not be able to, basically what's happening, I think my best guess is that it's a condition called rhabdomyolysis, where you are breaking down a lot of muscle tissues, and as you break down those tissues, it's releasing basically toxins into your blood, and your kidneys are trying to filter out toxins, but if you just like overload them with too much, they can't process it enough, and so that's when you end up becoming very ill, and it can be a risk. So I don't know where I started with this. I guess I think most people do not have the problem that they will push themselves so far that they could end up damaging themselves. But I think as someone who has a platform to talk to athletes and reach people, I feel like that's a message I do want to get out there, because I wish that someone had told me that when I started out and I was doing those workouts every week and like throwing up every week, and I wish someone had stopped me and been like, that isn't healthy. You need to stop.
You have to protect yourself, preserve self-preservation.
You have to protect yourself.
Yes, in coaching.
And the interest.
Yeah. Self-preservation. Yes. Self-preservation.
Right. And I think a big effect that came out of that, which was not a positive effect, is that I developed a phobia of racing. I liked training, but I actually hated racing. And I was so afraid. Like, I would wake up on race day and I would have no appetite. I would feel nauseous. I would be physically shaking. And that was just my reality of racing, because my body was so afraid. Like you're about to go and do this thing that could cause you damage. So I think maybe there's like some psychological trauma around my experience of racing. And so when I was going to Tokyo, one of my big more to Paris, one of my big goals was to try and work on this mental side, and to try and, calibrate myself so that I would be able to actually enjoy racing. When people ask me like, what is your goal in Paris? Like, where do you want to come? I'm like, I don't care where I come. I just want to enjoy the experience of racing.
Wow. Kathleen, this now is the backside. The world doesn't get to know what the elite athletes like you go through in the back end, the pain, the fears, the tears.
Yeah, it's real.
It's real. When they see the Kathleen on TV,
very hard,
rowing, going through the hits, they don't know behind the scenes there's a lot that goes on. So Kathleen, moving on.
There really is.
Moving on. What do you think is the most overlooked issue in rowing?
Most overlooked issue in rowing. I think maybe that glorification of people just completely going as hard as they possibly can is maybe an issue that I saw when I was rowing in university. I think it just depends, on the environment that you're in, right? Some environments are very just like, well, we're here for have fun, supportive, whatever. And then some, and I think this is true of any elite sport, right? When you get to higher levels, there's a lot of pressure to perform and people become, very, very nervous about it. So I don't think that's unique to rowing in particular. What maybe is unique to rowing and some other sports, maybe like cross-country skiing or longer distance swimming, is just the amount of physical exertion that it requires to perform that race. Because if you're swimming 50 meters, right, like that race is over before your body even switches into another energy system. It's so fast, like you can't exhaust yourself that much in 50 meters. But if you're doing something longer, like 2 kilometers, you really can. So I'm sure like people in athletics, right, will also run into these kinds of issues. So I think there's that. And then, I think that the access to infrastructure is a big issue in rowing, especially for having it available in countries like Uganda. Rowing is a very expensive sport. I have been so blessed that I've barely ever had to pay for anything in rowing because it was part of my university, and then I was kind of just sponsored into a club when I was training for the Olympics because people were just excited to support an Olympian. But a lot of the time it's very expensive for people who want to row, and purchasing the equipment is very expensive, and then getting it into the country, into Uganda, is its own nightmare with trying to clear revenue authorities and all of that. So even if you had boats that people would be willing to donate for free, getting them into the country is very difficult.
The taxes are quite high?
Right. Right, yeah.
Wow.
So I think that the biggest challenge that Uganda has for developing rowing, I think, is getting access to good equipment. And then after that, I think if we had that, then we could build a local, build up local teams. I think there is people that would be interested in it, but if you don't have the equipment, you can't really do anything.
Much. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, as we come to the end of this interview, what would you say is your most defining moment as a person, not in sports, or as Kathleen?
I'm not sure. I think that the things that most define us are often not things that we are super aware of in the moment, perhaps. Like, it's not necessarily a very highly emotional moment, but it's a decision that changes the trajectory of your life, so accepting to go to Princeton University, right? That was like a decision I made that has changed the whole trajectory of my life. Getting married, saying I do, that is a decision that changes the entire trajectory of your life, and becomes a part of your identity and your story in a way that is super impactful for the rest of your life. So I think probably those are the kind of moments that have had the biggest impact, is just when you decide to make a choice that has ramifications that will echo for the rest of your life.
Okay. So Kathleen, moving on, who is your personal hero?
My personal hero. I don't know. I suppose I admire a lot of people. I admire my parents a lot. I admire certain, saints and followers of God a lot. I don't know if I have a singular personal hero. I admire my husband a lot. So there's a lot of people that I admire, but I don't think I have a personal hero.
Okay. At the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned you're Christian, so you're a woman of faith. How does faith work in sports or in the things that you do as a person?
Well, I think in sports there can be a sense of strength that comes from believing that God is present with you when you are competing. I think it's foolish to think that faith will allow you to win something, and I think sometimes you see people like praying for victory, but I guess I don't really think of that as the way that God works to like give you victory in sporting events. But the way that I experience my faith within sport is more in just that sense of presence, which I find very important, and especially given that rowing is so physically demanding and hard, just having the idea that you can kind of draw on the strength of God, or that the Holy Spirit is with you while that you're not alone. Especially for me in a single, racing, the sense that I'm not alone has been very important to me in my competing.
Okay.
And I think another aspect maybe is this belief that, I think that God does not just give us things for our own benefit. Like, the privileges and opportunities that we're given are given to us in stewardship, that those would be things that we use to benefit other people. And so, though it hasn't always been clear the purpose of why I have been given these amazing opportunities of, representing Uganda at the Olympics, I've had a sense of faith along the way that there is a greater purpose and plan to it. And that God will use this to be able to bless people beyond myself, and that is my hope. And we will. And there's certain things that we have already seen that have worked out, and it has been very providential. And I think there's still a lot that we hope for that we haven't seen yet, and that we kind of hold on in faith will play themselves out over months or years or decades. I don't know, but I do believe that there is somehow a greater plan and calling to my athletic journey that is tied into God's purpose for my life. That will continue to work itself out for His glory, I hope.
Amen to that. So we didn't talk about your new record at the recent Paris Olympics. You set a new record. So tell us more about that.
So I set a new record, which was really just breaking my old record, but I broke it by a lot, by like almost 10 seconds. So I think before my record was 8:06, and then my new record was 7:56. For me, breaking 8 minutes was a big goal that I had, and so I was really, really pleased to be able to do that at the Olympics in my final race. It just felt like a fantastic way to end on such a high note.
Yes, talking of ending, we just learned that you retired. The last Paris Olympics were your last sports event. So what is your outro as a retiree Olympian? What would you tell the world? Your outro, I mean, your final words, being that you're now retiring or you've retired. I mean, what would be your final highlights for the sports fraternity or anyone else in the world that may listen or watch this podcast?
I think that framework that I developed is what I would leave behind. That compass that guided me, which is strong, skilled, fit, brave, and as you approach athletic pursuits, and perhaps it is applicable more broadly, that you have to kind of you have to work on those multiple different things at the same time, and you have to do that with a lot of intentionality and dedication, and that with that combination of intentionality and dedication, you can really achieve your goals.
Wow. Any last words to any young lady or any young man out there who says, when I grow up, I want to be like Kathleen Noble. She's achieved a lot. What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them maybe come and talk to me, and you can hear a bit about behind the scenes, because I think I think that you have to know what you're getting yourself into, and I think that there's a lot of struggles and there's a lot of sacrifices that you make along the way, and so I think that's a wonderful ambition, and I think you also have to be sober-minded about what you're really committing to, because it is a huge commitment. And people, they always ask me like, oh, why don't you just do another Olympics? And I'm like, do you have any idea what you're asking? Like, as if it's just a whimsical thing that you do. No, it's a huge commitment, and it takes a huge time commitment. It takes a financial commitment. It takes, a relationship, like the people that support you, it also kind of, it wears on them as well. And so I think absolutely it can be worth pursuing. And also you need to really think, what do I want from life? And do I know what this is going to cost me? And is that a price that I'm willing to pay? Is it worth it for me?
Wow. Kathleen, as final question, if you had a moment to meet Jesus Christ up close and personal over a cup of coffee, what would you tell him, or what would you say to him?
I wouldn't waste any time talking. I would just listen.
No. If he said one question, just one question.
I mean, Lord, what must I do to be saved? I think that's the question of, the man who came to Jesus and asked him, what must I do to be saved? And I think that
Nicodemus, John 3. Yes.
I think that would be my question, because his answer would then be my life purpose and my path forwards for my own salvation and his glorification.
Wow. Nice. Okay, so thank you so much, Kathleen. This is a very, very good session. I appreciate your time. We've had a bit of challenges getting to connect. We struggled, lost about 2 hours, almost an hour and a half trying to connect, but I'm glad we finally figured it out, and the internet worked and the tools and gadgets worked. So right at the end of this session of Ask the Author, I recap 5 lessons from the conversations that I have picked myself that our audience would like to learn. I think lesson number 1 I picked from you earlier is if you want to be an elite sports person, it just doesn't happen. From you starting with swimming and then doing volleyball and then moving into rowing. You have to prepare, plan, and be able to ready yourself. Lesson number 2 is sports is not a walk in the park. It is a very challenging task. When people see you holding the flag or at the Olympics, they're cheering you on, others are judging and saying you should have brought gold, you should have won, but they do not know what happens behind the scenes. Lesson number 3 is you have to push through the pain if you're to keep going. The mental fortitude, the support system around you has to also be very firm and solid, because you depend on them and you rely on them. And then lesson number 4, what I learned, this I will ask you to repeat for our lesson, because that was your outro. You did this, your symbol, your mantra, and you talked about, is it strength?
Strong, skilled, fit, brave.
Strong, skilled, fit, and brave. If you're to achieve what you want to achieve, you have to be strong, skilled, fit, and brave. Then the last lesson that we learned from the conversation today earlier is that you strike the balance, the right balance. You could keep going, and this could hurt you. It could harm you. And you didn't mention, probably for the listeners or the viewers to know, right before the Paris Olympics, you got ill, just about 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So can I say that during the Paris Olympics, you competed ill, or you had recovered fully?
So I was actually ill because I had done a piece that was too hard. And so it was a similar situation of where I had problems with my kidneys, and I was not still feeling sick by the time of the Olympics, but I lost a lot of weight. I had to take a whole week off of training just 2 weeks before the Olympics. And so that definitely had a cost, and it had an effect on my performance. And so it was about trying to recover as much as I could, recover my strength as much as I could, and to have a strategy for competing that wouldn't get me sick again.
Wow. Nonetheless, Kathleen, that was a noble gesture. You still beat your previous record despite your health issues during the Olympics, the Paris Olympics, the recent Paris Olympics. So it's been a pleasure speaking to you. You have inspired very many people. I mean, many people didn't know who Kathleen is, the challenges that you've gone through raising the Ugandan flag on an international stage and platform in sports. They did not know the pains that you went through, the sacrifices you've made. We do appreciate you back here in Uganda. Thanks for raising our flag high. And I know this conversation and this podcast is going to inspire very many